Oh, hey y'all. I guess I hit the button too quick. Now I'm up here in the high pasture. My foot's doing a lot better. It's healing. Just got a little puncture wound, and the pressure of those Band-Aids on it throughout the day just kind of gives you a dull pain. Well, I called and talked to Dad this morning. I got some dadisms coming up, by the way. Y'all stick around. Go ahead and sign off where you're at. We'll get to them here in a minute. Got a few thoughts to share, and I'm going to share something that I learned this last week. Thought I knew a pretty good bit about this story, but I didn't, like I thought I did. And what the kids say, I guess I was this week old. I get it all mixed up, whatever. When I discovered this, and I'll go you 6 ways to Sunday that you probably didn't know this either. And I thought it was a really cool revelation and really endured that story. But now I came up here, I was talking to Dad, and Benita's kind of in the healthcare industry, and my stepmother, and she was trying to help out with this whole sore on my foot, and she told me if I'd get some corn pads and put on it, it would take the pressure off of it. Said they make some big ones, and I didn't make it by Walgreens, so I don't know if I'm doing this right or not. Is that corn pad? I don't know. I thought I'd give it a shot, but I guess she'll tell me if I didn't do that right. How's y'all's week been? I hope it's been a good one. Rushing towards Father's Day and a celebration of Father's love. We've been talking about dadisms this week, doing a few extra live videos. I'm going to go back past my dad to my granddad. And boy, he had some doozies. Of course, most of them was affectionate name calling. But we won't get into that. He very wise man, very well studied. And I was talking to my aunt the other night, and I said, hey, what do you remember Pawpaw saying growing up? I've got my own, but I'm just curious. Boy, she didn't hesitate. She said, he always said, those that are headed nowhere will always arrive at their destination. Well, that's pretty good, right? I end up getting into life hacks. Y'all ever do that with the onset of social media and TikTok and all that business? And you look at one of them little silly videos, and they show you 50 ways you didn't know you could use WD-40 or a soda can or foot. There's all kind of them in it. And you thought you'd win all your life and knew everything you needed to know about a toilet paper roll until you watch that thing, right? I think about that sometimes, and it's kind of like old Paul said in Hebrews about the good book being a living word. Man, it's so true. It's like a seed. I've seen it from experience. Them old tomato seeds will sit in a dark envelope in that old farmhouse for several seasons, just laying there. And then one day I'll get hungry enough that I want to plant them to get some good fruit off of it. So I'll take them and put them in the dirt, and here they come, ready to go. They sat dormant until I was hungry enough and ready to put in the work. That's kind of like the old good book, sitting on the nightstand, just patiently waiting. And sometimes we read different verses, and they're good and they connect, but there are certain times in our life that maybe just what the younger generation says now is just hits a little different. Like Psalms 23, we could all quote it. Beautiful passage, but it's nice to read it. It's endearing to us, but you let it be read at a funeral of a loved one, and it just ministers a little bit different, doesn't it? It's funny about context. We'll get to that on this. The story, I'll go ahead and spill the beans, but you're going to want to stay tuned to hear this, because I wouldn't have missed it. I did for a few months when my daughter shared it with me, and it just worked out where prodigal son, the parable that Jesus shared, kind of fits this week. And I saw it in a whole different light. I've heard it preached about, talked about, spoke about, read about all my life. And I've talked to a couple of minister friends over the last few days, and honestly, they wasn't aware of this either. And it sure makes it so much more beautiful, so you want to stick around for that. But before I do that, and before we talk about it, just a little context, because that's important. I saw it shared by several people after I started researching it. It came to me through way of my daughter in South Carolina's pastor had shared this story. I think it was the weekend before Easter. I could share the link, it'd be great, but just in the realm of social media, sometimes it's not seen. And I'd kind of like this message to get out. It also taught me a little bit more about how to take what Jesus was saying as relevant to that day. I think so oftentimes we see the parables master teacher, master storyteller, and we read them, they're endeared to us, but at the same time we really don't have context for the situation around him. He was on the way to Jerusalem, the multitudes were following him. Wasn't but a few chapters later that he entered triumphantly and died on the cross. But as he ministered across that countryside of Israel, it was hot and dry. Little old bitty country. I think you could put you could put a bunch of them in Texas for sure. It's not about 9,000 square miles up against our 290 or 270,000 square miles. But this crowd was following him and had all kind of people in it. Some that he had healed and delivered and really was following him for who he was in Christ. There were some that just kind of wanted to know a little bit more about him. And there was a whole bunch of them that was waiting for him to slip up. The Pharisees and those that they could really chastise him for blasphemy. So Jesus had a tightrope to walk. Good thing he was who he was, or he might not have been able to make it. But to give it context, the story of the coin and the sower and the prodigal son. We read the story of the lost coin and we see what it means. We understand it, but it's told to a generation. What I probably got 3,000 pennies in a jar in there. I wouldn't miss one of them to speak of. Coins were hard to come by in that time. If I was to, I guess if my great-grandmother was able to come back for some reason and stroll through the house and come across an old note that I had written maybe one evening to Jordan, and it simply said, "Hey son, the internet's out, so no Netflix and chill tonight. Go ahead and use my card to order DoorDash for dinner. My cell phone charger isn't working right, so I'm going to run to Walmart and pick one up, and I'll be right back." That would be absolutely Greek to my great-grandmother, would it not? She'd probably pick up that I'm providing dinner some way through a DoorDash or something, and then I'm headed to town. That's about all she'd get out of it. Maybe she'd smile knowing that I'm providing dinner in some crazy way for my kiddo. So you have to put things in context for the people that are listening. You know, we see a picture of a little boy on a ride at Disney World with all smiles, and it's lovely. We like it. We might even comment on it. How cool is that? But then we read the story and we find out maybe that's his last trip. He's dying of leukemia and just wanted that one memory. Changes things, doesn't it? That's what this did for me on the prodigal son. Most of us know the story. The younger son decided he wanted to set out on his own and live the way he wanted to live. That's another thing. Prodigal doesn't mean that you went away. Prodigal, literally defined, is a spendthrift, someone that wastes money and just spends it on all kind of stuff, right? So I guess you could be a prodigal Christian, or sometimes in my life, prodigal farmer. But he left with the land that his dad had blessed him with. Land was hard to come by over there, y'all. Remember, they just marched through the desert generations before leaving Egypt. And, man, 290 miles long and about 85 miles wide, that ain't a whole lot of land for 2.5 million people. So a little parcel held value. His dad didn't anyway, and we know how it went. He went off and sold it, spent all his money, ended up in the pig pen, and got to thinking, man, I'm just going to go back to my father's house and be a servant. That's all I want to be. Well, we take it as that, and we hear the father runs to him, and everything's great, made up, all is well. Beautiful story about forgiveness. But let me deepen it a little bit for you. As Jesus told this story, the ones that were listening, they understood what DoorDash meant in context. They understood what Walmart was and cell phone. They could have read that note because he was talking in their terms of the day. You see, there's a ritual that the Jewish people celebrated or didn't celebrate, actually had, that was called Kazaza. Look it up, Google it if you'd like. Google will autocorrect it. It did for me when I looked it up. I always trust but verify when I hear things, and this is how it was. It was a ritual that happened in ancient times with the Israeli people, the Jews, when a son would take off with his inheritance and spend it all, and then would try to come back to acclimate back to the village after he had busted out. Well, what would happen in this ritual, the village elders would all gather at the city gate as the son was returning, or this person that had left the city had turned his back on them, and they would await his arrival along with throngs and crowds, because this was a spectacle to see someone groveling back after they had left with such fervor. And as the person approached, the city council, or elders if you would collaborate, talk, listen to the man's pitch, and decide whether or not they were going to banish him or accept him back. Now, the child's dad was never allowed at these. His mother was, because she would make the case for grace. But the dad wasn't, and there was a reason for that. But if they had means to have an inheritance, that meant that he was one of the wealthier of the bunch. And if he had attended that meeting, all he had to do was give his son his blessing, and the elders would have to disperse, and the son would be forgiven. So he wasn't allowed at the meeting. In the story we hear that the son was approaching the gate, and the father went running. At face value, it looks beautiful. But when you realize that the father broke all tradition and found another way out of the city in his robe as a prominent man full of etiquette, they weren't allowed to run. That was frowned upon. I guess in our old country terms, that was acting like a bubba, and just not good sense. So here a dad was breaking every tradition at the risk of shame because he loved his son that much. And he knew that he must reach his son at a distance to bless him to prevent his ultimate banishment at the city gates. It's pretty powerful stuff, y'all. I saw that note in a little different way this week. Makes me look at a lot of things a lot different. Even Christ, just offering it up on that cross for us all. Right? We're bound sometimes. I thought about one that I really remember. Dad reminded me of it this morning. As soon as he said it, I knew exactly the quote. But my grandfather was a student of history. He was an orator, statesman, way back in the day. Edmund Burke was his name. My granddad would quote the whole paragraph. I can't do that without reading it. But the last line of that sums it all up. He's talking about men and their ability to self-govern, to obey the rule of law, and to be temperate, right? The quote goes, "It is ordained in the eternal constitution of things that men of intemperate minds cannot be free. Their passions forge their fetters." All right, bring it up to 2024 terms, right? That sounds all noble, but what does that even mean? Well, intemperate means you have no self-control. You're blown about by the winds of change and your self-wants and desires. Fetters, we know what that is, that's chains. But to be more specific, it's chains on the foot. Can't even walk right anymore, right? I think we see that a lot. Maybe I've experienced it some in my own life, the lack of self-control, self-discipline. Beautiful quote. My granddad would bellow it out at the drop of a hat. It's so true even with our society today. So maybe we should strive to be a little bit more tempered, a little more self-controlled. If we do that, there's really no need for a lot of rules and laws necessarily, even though they'll still be there. The Constitution was probably I know it was the most inspired providential document ever given to mankind along with the Magna Carta. It was modeled after that, some other ones. But it was designed for temperate men. Society we live in now, a little dicey. I guess that's why we have so many additional laws and amendments and things of that nature. But that's political. We won't get into that. But it boils down to self-responsibility, I guess. Dad's big thing, one of them, along with that, is talking about an antithesis as we navigated life. It's a big old word. It doesn't mean a thesis written by an ant, necessarily. It just means proof of things. If there is a good, there's an evil. If there's an evil, there's a good. Right or wrong. You have to understand that sometimes to kind of get a grasp about life. You know, science doesn't even recognize cold as a thing. They'll tell you, this is science. This isn't religion or God think. It's just scientific fact for all of you that lean that way only. Cold is simply the absence of heat and the severity of it. Same with dark and light. Dark isn't a thing. It's just the absence of light in different severities. I would argue that good and evil is the same way. Don't know how in the world, if you were full of good and light and kindness, you could be evil to the degree that we see. So antithesis. I think about that a lot when someone says something like, well, what's its antithesis? Right? I guess, I don't know, what would the antithesis be of corn? I guess you could boil it down to anything, couldn't you? I guess so. Well, those are my main thoughts tonight. We'll do a quick roll call and see how everybody's doing. Had a good week, and maybe this old, I don't know if I got them corn pads right yet. I don't feel much difference. I probably didn't do it right. Probably gonna get a phone call after this one. That'll be all right. Oh, laughter, that's my joy. It's not an oxymoron, it goes together for me, or a simile. Yeah, I didn't take enough English to know all those meanings. I just walk and talk. Lighten it up a little bit. There's a tale of a poor old fella. He got pulled over by the state trooper. Walked up to the window. Nice enough. He said, sir, you know why I stopped you? He said, well, no, sir, I don't. He said, well, you do a 70 and a 55. He said, really? He said, yeah. He said, license and registration. The man said, I don't have them. He said, okay. Well, I won't need them. He said, well, I ain't got them. He said, don't look in the glove box. I got a pistol in there. He said, oh, you do? He said, yes, sir, I do. And that tarp in the back of the truck there is covering up a dead body. I just killed my neighbor. Well, that was enough for the cop, so he ran back to his car, red alert, and then about 15 minutes, there's at least 10, 15 cop cars surrounding that truck on the side of the road. The chief walked up to him, the head captain eased up to the truck. He said, sir, we've got some problems here. He said, okay. He said, I need to see your license and registration. So the man handed him his license and registration. He said, why don't you open that glove box there? I need to take a look at it. So he opened up the glove box and nothing was there. Old chief sat there and kind of scratched his head. He said, man, I was told that you didn't have a license or registration and didn't have it. You had a gun in the glove box and a body in the back of the truck. He said, oh, that's just some old tarps I'm hauling around. He said, I bet you that deputy told you I was doing 70 miles an hour and 55 too, didn't he? He eased out of that one pretty quick, didn't he? Oh, a little ingenuity, huh? I think that's the antithesis of good sense, to be honest with you, right there. Right? Well, let's see who all's on here tonight and where y'all is, and we'll call it a night at sunset. Well, I don't know what in the world this time. I think it was for a swing, but it looks like it's about to give up. It looks like something a little more sinister, but I know better. I'm gonna have to tear that thing down. It just don't look right. I ain't gonna have no time to be out here swinging in a swing, or however you say it. So might as well just tear it down. There's no purpose in that one, I don't reckon. All right, let me scroll back through here and we'll call it an evening. Let's see who we got on here. I'm going to have to put these things on. I talked to my optometrist customer today. We got to laughing. I said, man, you're just going to need to pull up one evening and bring me some real glasses and just throw these off. He said, looked at me. There's Miss Holly Marie out Georgia way saying howdy. Matthew Jones is in the building, or pastor, or wherever you said that at. Hey, buddy, how are you? Miss Deborah Meyer saying hello. Back at you. There's Miss Mary Weir. Good evening to you. Susan Kay's checking in. Hi. Rodney Johnson. Good to see you too, sir. There's my friend Donna out Huntsville Way. Wild man. That's right. There's Miss Valerie Joyce Johnson. That was my mother's name, Joyce Johnson. How about that? That's cool. Yes, ma'am. You're welcome for that. It was definitely a revelation for me. Miss Margaret Hunt. How are you? Good to see you checking in this evening in Indiana. All right. Well, that's everybody. Hot weather. Let's see. Oh, Valerie said Jacksonville, Florida. All right. Well, I'll after the fact go back through and read who all checks in after the live. But all is copacetic here on the place this evening. Hope that helped you out on that prodigal son story. I really enjoyed that, and gave something pretty cool for Faith and I to talk about too. Seeing things in a different light. So remember that as you read that living word. It's an ultimate life hack, right? You may have looked at it several times, but when you need it, it'll jump off the page at you just in time. That's something. These lantanas, they'll be dead all the way to the ground in the winter, and here they come again. I don't much care for the smell of them, they're kind of weird. They're pretty to look at, I guess. It takes all kinds, right? Y'all have a good evening. Be the light. I'm going to watch this sunset. I got some new coffee the other night. But, well, I told the subscribers about it. It's pretty good. But I can't talk about it on here because it's public and I'd be advertising, and then Facebook would be, Lord have mercy at the rules. Whatever. All right. If y'all jump on the subscriber, you'll see that it's whatever. All right. Y'all have a good night. Be the light. We'll talk to you soon.